Testimonies for the Church, Volume 6, page number 380. We may have knowledge, but unless we know how to use the voice correctly, our work will be a what? A failure. Unless we can clothe our ideas in appropriate language, of what avail is our education? Knowledge will be of little advantage to us unless we cultivate the talent of speech, but it is a wonderful power when combined with the ability to speak wise, helpful words and to speak them in a way that will command attention. So we need to be very careful about the message that we share, how we share it, and cultivate it, she says. In other words, make it better, improve it. All right, we have a message that's coming up here to the board, so go ahead and just write it in the blank section of the board down there, and we'll see how close you guys were. We're going to continue here, though. So Matthew chapter 28, verses 19 and 20. What message is it that we have to share as Seventh-day Adventist Christians living in the closing hours of Earth's history? Matthew 28, 19 and 20 says, "Go therefore and make what? Disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit." So that is what we call the Great Commission or the Gospel Commission. Jesus has given that to us. It was one of the very last commands that he gave to his followers, and it is for us to share with the rest of the world. Now, he continues, "Teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Amen." So Jesus commands us to go and make what again? Go and make disciples. Now, if you've ever heard me preach, no doubt you have heard me pause on this passage and dwell on it and unpack it just a little bit, because I do it on a very, very, this is interesting, and kind of pull some things out of it. Now, what is a disciple? If I were to ask you, what is a disciple? What is a disciple? It is a follower of Christ, right? We typically associate with it as a follower of Christ. And if you have ever taken a multiple choice test or a multiple choice quiz, you know that there are two types of multiple choice quizzes. One of them has instructions that say, of the options below, choose the correct answer. You've seen those, right? Okay, those are the easy kind of multiple choice quizzes. The more difficult ones say, of the choices below, choose the most correct answer. That indicates that there's more than one what? Correct answer, but one of them is more correct than the others. So what is a disciple? A disciple is a follower of Jesus. That is a correct answer. But there is a more correct answer or a most correct answer. If you were to look up the dictionary definition of a disciple, I pulled it here from the American Heritage Dictionary, but you can find it in others. A disciple is a person who subscribes to the teachings of a master and assists in spreading them. So a disciple is not just a follower of Jesus. That misses a significant aspect of what a disciple actually is. A disciple doesn't just follow Jesus, but then they share what Jesus has shared with them. This is how the gospel is to go to all the world. And if the gospel is going to go to all the world, it's going to involve something that starts with the letter C, and it's what this first get-together is all about, and that's what? Communication. So we have to be able to effectively and efficiently communicate the gospel with the world in order for the gospel to go to all the world, so that, and ultimately then Jesus can come back. So, how confident are you in your transmission of the message? Not very. I see a lot of heads going back and forth. So here's what we ended up getting. 12-minute dumpling. All right. Well, that's creative at the very least. So what was the original message? Remember, I told you it was how many words? 6 words. Okay, so we cut it down to half, which is efficient. 12, got that. Tumbling. People. Purple people. 12 tumbling purple people pulled turnips. And we got a 12-minute dumpling out of that. Yes, it was a difficult message. I'm not going to make it easy for you. Yes.
I will say that the concept is flawed because there is not a confirmation readback between each layer throughout.
Yep, you're right. There isn't. There isn't. And a lot of times when we share the message, they don't get an opportunity to come back and say, hey, did I understand it correctly? So you get often one shot at getting the message out, and so you need to make sure that it's as clear as possible. So anyway, 12 tumbling purple people pulled turnips turned into a 12-minute dumpling. All right. So we've at least hopefully illustrated the importance of effective communication. Now, how do we communicate? We're going to look at some principles that we can use that are pretty much universal. And I wanted to share a quote with you from Napoleon, who really summed up what a leader really is. Now, how did he do it? He put it this way: a leader is a dealer in hope. So a leader should elicit hope from someone. They should buoy up this idea of hope in a person. So when we're sharing the gospel is a message of what? It's a message of hope. And so we need people to be able to see that message. Now, have you ever heard someone share, and I'm not going to talk about in a sermon at South Bay, but have you heard somewhere in your life someone preach a sermon that you couldn't quite find the hope in? All right? A lot of times you'll hear a message of condemnation, a message of you're not good enough, a message of if you don't do the right thing, you're going to burn. This is not the message of hope. Jesus brought a message of hope, and so he calls us to bring a message of hope as well. So let's take a look at 3 different people in the Bible who were, I think we could all agree, effective communicators. They may not have been perfect, but they were effective communicators. We're going to start with Moses. Now I'm going to invite you to give me some feedback here. Can you think of some events in Moses' life when he was an effective communicator, when he was called upon to be an effective communicator? There's no wrong answers here. I mean, unless you start telling stories of Paul instead of Moses, then that might not be exactly right. But can you think of some times in Moses' life when he was called upon to communicate effectively? Yes. With Pharaoh, let my people go. Do you think he needed to be effective there? He's being called upon by God to set his people free from a tyrant. Important to communicate effectively. Any other times in Moses' life? Setting up the sanctuary and the tabernacle service. So God gave Moses the instructions of how to set that up, and Moses then had to share that with others so that they would know how to set it up and to build it and so forth. Very good. Any other times? Yes? Yes, when there was a bit of a rebellion in the camp, this little golden calf issue thing that was going on. And he communicated fairly effectively, didn't he? Yep. Think of any other times. And again, like I said, there's no wrong answers. When he came down from Sinai and he read the 10 Commandments to the Israelites. Important to get those right and to get that idea across, right? Yes? The Red Sea, absolutely. This was an important one, right? Very good. Here are 3 that I came up with. Ooh, it doesn't come out real well with this lighting. My apologies. Before Pharaoh, during rebellions, we talked about that. How about during the wilderness wandering? Where there's some challenges that his people faced out there and kind of resulted in some rebellions as well. How about Nehemiah? We just went through Nehemiah not too long ago in our Sabbath school lessons. Can you think of any times in Nehemiah's ministry when effective communication was important for him in Nehemiah's ministry? Yes?
Telling sons to get rid of their pagan wives.
Get rid of the pagan wives, right? That's important. Get that message through clearly. Any others? He got them excited about building the wall. So he kind of drummed up support and enthusiasm for that. If he had just kind of said, if you want to build a wall, go for it. If not, who cares? You're not going to get much done. But he was behind it, and he believed in it enough that people could see it in him, did he pitch in with them? Yeah, he was right there with them. Any other times in Nehemiah's life when he was an effective communicator or called upon to be an effective communicator? With the king, right? That's at the very beginning. He needed to share with the king his vision in a way that the king would say, I think this is a great idea, and give him what he needed to go about and do it. Any others? With his enemies, yep. He had his enemies that were coming and trying to derail the whole project, and so he needed to communicate effectively with them. Sometimes it was just saying, I am not going to come down, right? You want me to come down? Not happening. But it was effective communication. So I pulled together before the king, with the builders, and against his foes. So some of those that you guys came up with as well. How about Jesus as a communicator or as a leader? Sometimes when Jesus was called upon to be an effective communicator. Yeah.
The quintessential opposite of that is when they ask him questions near the end.
Yes.
And he didn't respond. So he was communicating by not giving an answer.
By not giving an answer. Yep. Sometimes saying nothing says volumes. Yep. Very good. Any ideas with Jesus? The Sermon on the Mount. The multitudes. So we're still talking about the Sermon on the Mount today. I mean, that's effective communication 2,000 years down the line, right? When else was he an effective communicator? When he's in the temple? Turned over the money changers' tables. You know, he added some illustrations to his verbiage, right? Very effective ones. Yep, absolutely. Yes. When he was tempted by Satan. Yep, absolutely. Again, another time that he was very effective in his communication. Yes?
Was there a time he wasn't effective?
Ooh. So if we're going to study an effective communicator, who might be a good person to study? Jesus would be a very good person to study. That's for sure. Any others? Feeding the people. That's right. Feeding the people with the bread and the fishes. Yeah, they wanted to follow him. In fact, they wanted to make him king, right? Very effective. They were a little disappointed when that wasn't his plan, but still many of them chose to follow. So I put up with his disciples, the Sermon on the Mount. How about with Nicodemus? He was a very effective communicator with Nicodemus. Did he communicate differently with different groups of people? He did, very much so. But he chose the method of communication with the specific audience. And so when we're communicating the gospel with people, or in whatever setting we find ourselves, at school, at work, at play, we need to take into consideration the environment that we're in, the people who are with us, so that they can have the best opportunity to hear clearly what it is that we're sharing. For those of you who came in a little bit late, we have at least one or two more handouts up here. You're welcome to grab those and follow along if you would like. I have up here on the screen a communication theory. It's a chart that kind of describes how communication takes place, and there are many different communication theories out there in the world. You can see it probably a little bit better on your handout. This one happens to be Shannon's communication theory, but it's pretty basic. Essentially what you have is the sender over here. The sender wants to send a message. They want to communicate. You could communicate by speaking, you could communicate by writing, you can communicate by singing, you can communicate by text messaging. Lots of different ways that you can communicate. So you have this message that you want to send, and you figure out how you're going to send it. That's the encoding here. You send it through whatever channel that happens to be. Could be, again, voice, could be over an email, could be a text, could be singing. And over here, they decode it. The receiver hears the message and tries to get the most out of it that they can. We had a very graphic illustration of how this does or doesn't work at the beginning of our time together this afternoon, didn't we? You know, as you whispered or somebody whispered the message into your ear, there's something that occurred in the middle of it called what? Noise. Now that could be literal noise, or it could be more philosophical noise. That could be the past experiences of our life that kind of impact the way that we hear things or the way that we understand things. This time it probably had to do with volume and other literal noise in the room that prevented you from hearing the message clearly. But regardless of what that type of noise is, there's always noise when we are talking with someone else. Have you ever tried to share something with someone, and to your mind it was as clear as a bell, and yet they didn't get it? You know, a lot of times it's just that they've got background, they've got history, that doesn't allow them to understand the message that you're trying to share. So you need to take that into consideration as you are formulating how you're going to share that message. The receiver then, in order for communication to take place, it needs to go both ways. So the receiver then receives whatever message you shared with them, and they formulate a response. It comes back toward you, but again, you're going to run into what? You're going to run into noise again. So keep in mind as you're trying to communicate with someone, it could be culture, it could be age, it could be education, it could be work background, it could be belief system, but there's always going to be some noise in there that you have to take into account. So the more that you can do to lower the volume of that noise, the better the message is going to make it through to the person that you're trying to share it with. In Matthew 24, verse 14 says, "And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in how much of the world? All the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come." So ultimately, we've got to get the gospel to all the world before Jesus comes back to take us home so that life can be all that Jesus intended it for it to be. Amen? So how can we do that? I'm going to share some principles that you'll see there in your handout, and again, you can fill in the blanks as we go, on how to communicate effectively. Now, these are kind of distilled from a book by Dale Carnegie called How to Win Friends and Influence People. How many of you have read that book? About 3 or 4 or 5 of you maybe. It is a phenomenal book on communication. It's probably about 75 or 80 years old at this point, but I haven't come across one that's better yet. But the principles are so simple, and if you look at the people in the Bible who were effective communicators, they were using these principles. I don't think they learned them from Carnegie. I think Carnegie learned them from them. So just in your mind as we go through these, ask yourself who in the Bible practiced these effectively, to see if you can think of a story or two as we go through them. So some fundamental techniques in handling people. First one is don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Now, some of us are shifting uncomfortably in our seats already as we think about our attempts at communication. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. If you're trying to effectively communicate with somebody, if somebody's trying to effectively communicate with you, and they start criticizing and condemning you, how closely are you going to listen to them most of the time? Probably not too much. So we want to try to focus on more positive modes of communication. Give honest and sincere appreciation. Give honest and sincere appreciation. If you want somebody to listen to you, appreciate them. Appreciate them. And number 3, arouse in the other person an eager want. This is one of the foundational principles, I guess you could say, of the work that I've been involved in for the last 20 years, and that's evangelism. When you share something with someone, you want them to want more. You want them coming back and saying, Eric, tell me more. Doug, tell me more. Chris, tell me more. Johanna, tell me more. I want to know more. If they're not wanting more, are you effectively communicating with them? No, they're wishing that you would, Eric, could you please go away? Could you please just be quiet, right? Something's not working with the communication. But if you're trying to break free of their grasp and get out the door because they want to know more, something's working. So arouse in the other person an eager want. Here's 6 ways that you can make people like you. How many of you would like to have people like you? Half of you would. Most of us, I think, want people to like us. Now, is everybody going to like us? No, certainly not. But if we can give people reasons to like us, would you rather hear a message from someone that you liked or that you didn't like? You'd rather hear something from someone that you like. So why not be a likable person? How can you be a likable person? Several ways here. We're going to go through 6 of them. Number 1, become genuinely interested in other people. Become genuinely interested in other people. Have you ever spoken with somebody who you could tell really didn't care that they were talking with you? How do you feel? when that happens? Yeah, it doesn't make you feel real good, does it? Makes you feel low, makes you feel like you really don't want to be around that person. So how can you be a likable person? Number one, become genuinely interested in other people. You think of anybody in the Bible who was genuinely interested with the people they were talking to? Jesus. Now, chances are the default answer in about all of these is going to be Jesus. I'm hoping that you'll dig a little bit deeper. Yes, Jesus is the correct answer. But when were some times that you could tell Jesus was very interested in the people that he was talking to? The woman at the well, boom, came right out. Woman at the well, right? Could she tell that he was interested in her? Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Think of any other times? Lawyer? The lawyer. Which one?
I'm thinking of where the lawyer gave the right answer. Jesus loved that. Oh, maybe it's the rich young ruler. He loved him.
Yes, rich young ruler. Okay, very good. Yep, rich young ruler. He was very interested in him. Any other times? Or any other people? Again? The kids, yes. The kids were drawn to Jesus, right? And Zacchaeus' life was changed because Jesus stopped and said, Zacchaeus, come down, right? And he invited himself to his house. Must have done something to reach reach Zacchaeus for him to be able to invite himself to his house. The woman caught in adultery. Jesus was extremely interested in her. Here's a second way to make people like you. Smile. I know this is a tough one, but shall we try it now? Yeah, most of you didn't do that too badly. Some of you are struggling a little bit. But you smile. This is one of the tricks of preaching. If you just get up there and smile at people, guess what they'll do? They'll smile right back at you. And when you've got a sea of people smiling at you, it makes it so much easier to preach. Because you're just looking out and everybody's smiling and you just let it go. But if everybody's out there going like this, makes it tough to preach. But anyway, smile at people and you will find that they are more inclined to like you. Number 3, remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. If you can use that person's name, and this will also help you to remember their name. Have you ever had any challenges in remembering somebody's name? If you, when you meet that person, start to use that person's name in conversation with them, it'll start to ingrain in your mind, in your memory. Use that person's name. I'm trying to think if there was any time in the Bible. Can you think of a time in the Bible when someone used someone else's name to really connect with them? Martha, Martha. You're so busy, right? Nathaniel, right? How about Peter? Yeah. Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? Right? Matthias? Why not? Mililani suggests Matthias. Good suggestion. When Lazarus, come forth, that worked, right? Fourth way, be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Some people need very little encouragement in this department. Give them half a moment, and they will just let loose. I was in a car recently. It was an Uber or a Lyft. I think it was out in California, and was riding with another guy. And I said, "So, what do you do?" That was it. It just, 45 minutes. Just ba 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 ba. Like, whew, all right. But I don't know that I was very effective in communicating that time. But more often than not, if you're a good listener, I was a good listener, encourage others to talk about themselves, and they will. Talk in terms of the other person's interests. Talk in terms of the other person's interests. If all you do is talk about the things you are interested in, people will get very tired of being with you. But if you can talk about something that they're interested in, and you know, one of the easiest things to do is just ask them about it. If they show an interest, express an interest in something, Ask them more about it. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to share more. And you will become their best friend. You know why? Because you listened. You listened and you cared about things that were important to them. Number 6, make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. That last word is really an important one. Make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. Can you think of a time in the Bible when someone made someone else feel important and it made an impact on them? Yeah, Michael. Yeah, good. David made Mephibosheth, I can always trip over my tongue on that one, Mephibosheth feel very important. Excellent. Any other times? Zacchaeus, he made Zacchaeus feel important. He sure did. Yep, going to your house today. Not anybody else's house, your house. Any others? The woman with the issue of blood. Who touched me? And then he talked directly to her. In that crowd of people, he picked her out. Made a big difference in her life. Yeah. So if you're trying to win people to your way of thinking, is that part of the sharing of the gospel? What do you think? Now, we've got to kind of be careful with this phrase, because it's not really our way of thinking, is it? Whose way of thinking is it? It's Jesus, but our desire is to share Jesus' way of thinking with others. Are there some misconceptions about Jesus in the world today? Are there some misconceptions about salvation in the world today? The character of God? There's a lot of them. So what we have to do is to shed light on the genuine gospel. How can we win people to our, or in this case, Christ's way of thinking? Well, here's a good way to start. The only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. As soon as you get into an argument with somebody, you're probably not going to get very far. You've heard the phrase, no doubt, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. You can win the argument, but you'll lose the war. Because if they just feel beaten, they're not going to come around to your way of thinking. So avoid the argument if at all possible. Find another way to come in. Show respect for the other person's opinions and never say, you're wrong. That's a little direct, perhaps we should say. Show respect for the other person's opinions. Is it possible to show respect for a person's opinion even if they are wrong? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You can say, I can understand how you feel. Should you be able to say that honestly? Yeah, have you ever been challenged by somebody else and been on the other end of it? Yeah, I can understand how you feel. So you can still share the message, but do it in a way that respects the other person's opinions. If you are wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. Have you ever met somebody who was never wrong? Was always, don't be looking at the person sitting next to you. How do you feel when you run into somebody who is never wrong? Do you like to be around that person? Only to prove them wrong, right? That's the incentive you need. I'm going to fix you sooner or later, right? If you are wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. How many of you have ever admitted that you were wrong about something? Ooh, some hands went up really fast, right? Yes, been there. You will gain respect from somebody if you honestly admit when you're wrong. So you know what? I was mistaken. That opens the door to further communication. But if you dig in your heels and continue to assert your rightness when you were wrong, it closes doors to communication. Begin in a friendly way. So again, this kind of comes back to the very basics. We want to try to communicate, if at all possible, in a friendly manner. Get the other person saying yes, yes, immediately. If you're trying to help somebody move somebody from where they are in their belief systems and direction to a better path, one of the most effective ways to do that is to get them saying yes. I remember meetings I did some years ago. There was a woman who had come to I don't know, probably 3, 4, 5 previous evangelistic meetings and had never made a decision to get baptized and join the church. And so the pastors alerted me when I came. They said, this lady's come over and over and over again, and it's not that she doesn't believe anything, she's just doesn't believe what we believe, she just never makes the decision to join. I said, okay, thanks for giving me a little background on her. And so we went through the whole series, and I visited with her. I made friends with her throughout the meetings, connected with her. And as we got down to the end, I was doing decision cards and making calls for baptism and things like that, and she wasn't filling out the cards, and she wasn't coming forward just like she had always done before. And so I said, well, I'm going to see if I can visit with this woman, sit down and talk with her. And so I usually, when people are wanting to be baptized, they get signed up on a little list to sit down and talk with me, have a little one-on-one interview. She didn't come to me, so I wrote her name down. I said, I'd like to visit with you on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Are you free? Why do you want to visit with me? Would you be willing to meet with me at 2 p.m.? Yeah, sure. So she came and met with me. And I went down through the basic teachings of the Bible. You believe the Bible, don't you? Yes, I do. You've accepted Jesus as your Savior, haven't you? Yes, I have. You understand that Jesus wants us to live by his law, don't you? Yes, I understand that. You've seen in the Bible about the Sabbath, that God wants it. Yes, I've seen it. Yes, 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 yes. State of the dead health message. Yes, 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 yes. When she says yes 28 times, it's very hard for her at the end to say no. Would you like to take that final step and become a part of God's remnant church? Yeah, I guess I would. And she got baptized. It's simply getting the other person to say yes. The more that you can get them to agree with what you've covered so far, what you've connected with them with, is that even English? The further that you can do that, the more likely you're to get a yes as you move forward. Let the other person do a great deal of the talking. As you're visiting with somebody, as you're sharing your faith with somebody, as you're working in the office with somebody trying to get them to move to the direction that you'd like them to move to, let the other person do a great deal of the talking rather than yourself. You've heard it said that there's a reason God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth or tongue. It's because we should do twice as much listening as we do talking. Try not to cast sideways glances at your spouse. Other ways to win people to your way of thinking. Let the other person feel that the idea is his or hers. If you want somebody to do something, plant seeds and then let them come up with the idea. And you can say, that's a great idea. And it was you who was doing all the work behind the scenes beforehand. But they think they came up with the idea. Makes it can be a little bit of a challenge to figure out how to do that. But I found especially in teaching with students, if they can come up with the answer themselves rather than me giving them the answer, they own it. It belongs to them. It's no longer me telling them something or showing them something. They came up with it themselves, and now it belongs to them. So let the other person feel that the idea is his or hers. Try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. How's the old saying go? You'll have to help me with this. Never condemn a person until you've what? Walked a mile in their shoes, right? So see where they're coming from. If you were in their shoes, you might see things exactly the same way that they see things. Now, this can be an interesting challenge when you're working cross generations. I guess I'm Gen X. I always have a hard time classifying myself. I'm Gen X, I guess. I'm certainly not a millennial, and I'm not a Gen Z, right? So for me to try to connect sometimes with millennials and Gen Z, that's a whole different worldview, right? I text slowly. I think about where those letters are, all right? I know some of you can do that. You do this in your sleep, and I don't get it, but you do. So somehow we've got to come across those gaps, whether it's theologically or educationally or generationally, to try to honestly see things from the other person's point of view. Be sympathetic with the other person's ideas and desires. Be sympathetic with the other person's ideas and desires. Have you heard the phrase, the 3 F's? or the terms of 3 F's, if you're trying to help somebody make a decision, move in the right direction, the 3 F's are feel, felt, and found. I understand why you might feel that way. You know what? Other people have felt that way too. But you know what I've found? Feel, felt, and found. I've felt that way before. Other people have felt that way before. I understand how you feel. Other people have felt that way. Be sympathetic with the other person's ideas and desires. But you know what I've found? And then share what you found. More often than not, if you can point them to Jesus with the found, that'll help them go a long way. So be sympathetic with the other person's ideas and desires. Appeal to nobler motives. I guess that's pretty self-explanatory. Dramatize your ideas. What does that mean? Dramatize your ideas. Doesn't mean write a play. Some people are disappointed that's not what it means. Make a skit. Well, maybe not. How can you dramatize your idea? Give me liberty or give me death. Wow, how's that for drama, right? That's a lot of drama. If somebody came to you and said, hey, I'm thinking of writing a book and I was wondering if you'd look it over and see if it's any good. Could you help me with that? How many of you are going to sign up for that? Like, not really excited about it. How could you, if you wanted to write a book and have somebody else help you with it, look it over, make some suggestions, how might you dramatize this idea a little bit more? We want to be famous? There you go. That could work. Yeah, be my editor. That could work. Get your name published. How else could you do that? Yeah, show an excitement. Yes. Oh, write the foreword to the book. So you have a part in the book. Write that forward. That could speak volumes to some folks. Show some enthusiasm in what your idea is, and you'll find that people go along with it a little bit more readily. Throw down a challenge. How could you throw down a challenge with somebody? Envision that. What might that look like? If you're trying to get somebody to see your way, I'll bet you can't. A triple dog dare you, right? Yeah. I'll give you $1,000 if you find a text in the Bible. I've used that one, I don't know, over 100 times. And you know what? People will look for that text. They'll look for that missing text. You throw down a challenge and people will go for it. So how do you change people without giving offense or arousing resentment in them? A leader's job often includes changing your people's attitudes and behavior. Here are some suggestions to accomplish this. Number one, begin with praise and honest appreciation. If you do have to criticize somebody, and it does happen in life, there's something that you can offer them that's called a criticism sandwich, or if you prefer, a praise sandwich. That's where you begin by offering praise to them about something, and then you address the criticism, and then you close with praise again. Can you think of any part of the Bible where there's praise given and then criticism? All except for Laodicea, right? The churches in Revelation. Here's all this good stuff, but I've got this against you. Here's some good stuff, but I've got this against you. You see that over and over again in the churches in Revelation. Number two, call attention to people's mistakes indirectly. There seems to be some fruit juice spilled on the carpet. I wonder how that got there. It's a little more indirect than yelling, Noelani, Justin, Hilda Lisa. Yeah, a little more indirect. Yeah. When you make mistakes, admit them immediately. Talk about your own mistakes before criticizing the other person. This is a good one, especially if you're dealing with kids. You know, when I was your age, I did the same thing. Took me a while, but I figured it out. Or if you were trying to train someone else in your area of work, hey, when I started here, I did the same thing. You should have seen me the first time I pulled meds for a patient, or the first time I did a draft for, architect. You should have seen the first TV program I recorded, right? You're doing okay. But here's some things that you might do to improve. So, talk about your own mistakes before criticizing the other person. Ask questions instead of giving direct orders. This is not a bad one. Instead of telling people what they need to do, ask some questions. Do you think the graphics that we have on this PowerPoint presentation are the best that they could be? If you're wanting somebody to maybe improve them a little bit, ask questions rather than just say, this thing really stinks. Go, I know, right? Yeah, there's probably some improvements that could be made. Next week, come on back. Let the other person save face. Don't throw them under the bus. Let them save face. Praise the slightest improvement and praise every improvement. Be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise. Give the other person a fine reputation to live up to. You've got more in you than this. I've seen more in you than this. I know that you can do better. So give them a reputation to live up to. Use encouragement. Make the fault seem easy to correct. And make the other person happy about doing the thing that you suggest. Make the other person happy about doing the thing that you suggest. Can you think of anything in the Bible, any time in the Bible when somebody asked someone to do something and made them feel happy about it? How about Jesus calling the disciples? Here they were, fishing, collecting taxes, just doing their business, and I don't know how Jesus said it, but he just said, "Follow me." And they dropped everything they were doing and immediately went and followed him. They were happy about doing that. You think of any other times that somebody made someone else happy about doing the thing that they suggested? How about Paul going to his death? Was he moping around? No, he said, yeah, I'm happy to give my life for Christ. He believed in it. So I'm going to give you a scenario. We're going to break into some little groups here, groups of about 3 or 4, probably no more than 4. Here's a scenario. Let's put this into practice. You are the teacher of a Sabbath school class with about 15 people who regularly attend. 2 of your class members tend to be disruptive in the discussions every week. So this is not a bad class, only 2 out of 15, right? So 2 of your class members tend to be disruptive in the discussions each week. The first person clearly has an agenda that he wants to push, and regardless of what the topic happens to be for the week, he steers the conversation toward his pet topic on a regular basis. How many of you have ever been anywhere in a Sabbath school class where that happened? Never heard of such a thing, right? We're all about honesty here today. So that's one person. The second person has experienced a traumatic life, and she regularly uses the group setting to share stories of her past to drum up sympathy for her current situation. Which of these 2 situations would you address first, and how would you go about doing so? Which of those 2 situations would you address first? So you're the leader of the Sabbath school class. Which one would you address first, and how would you go about doing it, putting into practice some of the principles that we've been talking about this afternoon? So you got about 5 minutes, break into groups of 3 or no more than 4. I'll give you about 5 minutes. Talk about which one you would address first, how you would go about doing it, and then we're going to come back together and share some of the things that we came up with. So 5 minutes. The time is now 2:32. At 2:37, we're going to come back and share, and we're going to do it pretty quickly. So find some friendly-looking people. Remember, one of the things you can do to win friends and influence people is to smile at them. So smile at the people near you, make a friend, and take a few minutes to discuss this. The ideas that you had, how many of you just by, let's choose a group spokesperson, and by show of hands, how many of you chose to address the person with the pet topic first? So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-ish, 6-ish. How many of you chose to address the person with the troubled background first? 2 or 3-ish, kind of halfway in between. Okay. For those of you who chose to address the 12 tumbling purple people pulled turnips. With the pet topic, how did you decide to approach this individual to try to affect a change, a positive change? Who would like to share something?
We did the praise sandwich, so we said that's very interesting, but let's talk about that afterward.
Okay, very good. The praise sandwich.
We could have a Bible study.
Hey, good, excellent. Yep. Other ideas?
Can we use something that's not on this chart?
Yes, go right ahead.
Adhering to a time constraint.
Okay,
So hey, that's an interesting thought, but to get through our agenda for what we need to get through in this Sabbath school class, we've got to stay on topic.
good.
We can talk about it after. You can come and you and I can talk about this afterwards.
Good. It's paralleling this one, same sort of idea. Good, very good. Other ideas? Yes. Yes. Yep. Yep. Good. Address, yep. Absolutely needs to be addressed immediately. All right, how about those of you who chose to address the person with the background that kind of keeps coming up and she's trying to drum up sympathy for herself? How did you decide to address her? Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Good. Excellent. Use those 3 F's. Very good. Any other suggestions on her? Show compassion. Yes. Absolutely need to show compassion. Mm-hmm. Could be. Yep. So get her connected with the women's ministry. Very good. Yes.
She would be a prime person to praise improvements and growth in New Zealand.
Praise improvements and growth would be excellent for her. Yep. That would mean a lot to her. Very good. All right. Good ideas. Good suggestions. So here is your homework. We've got homework. It's not hard homework. Hopefully not. Your homework is in your school or your work or your home. Intentionally use some of the communication skills that we talked about today to help move someone or someone's, I know that's not proper English, into line with an objective that you have. Hopefully this is a positive objective. And be prepared to share your experience next week when we come back together. So that should be on your sheet. So during the course of this week, put into practice something that you learned here today, and then share when we come together next week how that worked for you.